Before we start today's video, I'd like to take the opportunity to shill Suit Yourself, who has, after many times being false flagged off this platform, managed to get a new channel. Now, he did have a strike recently, but thankfully it was lifted, and hopefully this time it is permanent, because quite frankly, you, the pathetic schmuck that kept flagging him, are an abomination and not worth anyone's time. Stop being so utterly cruel to him, you feckless worm. There is a link to his channel in the description. Please subscribe to him because he is somebody that deserves a lot more for what he has done in the past, and he has helped many creators on this platform. So the subject of today's video, now that I've gotten that out of the way, is the recent United States leaving the UN Council on Human Rights, which has caused a bit of an uproar, but I don't think it should have, because for me, I've always thought of the UN as a bit of a Mickey Mouse joke. I think I've already said joke with Mickey Mouse. Maybe I'll just say joke. Because, and interestingly enough, we have to then reference the UN Council on Human Rights, where the current chair is Saudi Arabia. If memory serves, Saudi Arabia hasn't even signed the Human Rights Bill. Saudi Arabia has a horrific history on human rights. Saudi Arabia has spent 18 months bombing Yemen. Are you kidding me? They are not the right people to be chairing this. Now, there are a host of reasons why they are even a member to begin with, some of which I think should, could, and shall possibly be amended in the future if anyone with 2 brain cells thinks about it. But for this video, we're going to address a couple of articles that are relevant to the subject matter, because I want you to understand my position that there are a number of countries who are members of the UN Council on Human Rights that do not belong there, and are only there because of regional competition, i.e. they represent a region of the world, which to me is mildly irritating but also understandable, since a country needs to represent it, and obviously irritating because clearly the other countries are not up to scratch, especially if Saudi Arabia wins, which they did not so long ago and got a second term. Also interesting to note that Saudi Arabia got their position around the same time the United Kingdom did, and it was assumed by many that David Cameron had something to do with it, which doesn't surprise me in the slightest. So, the US has pulled out of the United Nations Human Rights Council, calling it a cesspool of political bias. Nikki Haley, the US envoy to the UN, said it was a hypocritical body that makes a mockery of human rights. Based on the members, I'm inclined to agree. Formed in 2006, the Geneva-based council has faced criticism in the past for allowing member countries with questionable human rights records. They are not questionable human rights records. They are truly outrageous, disgusting, abhorrent, and quite frankly an insult to the very nature of human rights. Then again, and I'm sure someone will be pedantic enough to point this out to me, there is no truly innocent country. However, whereas some have reformed or are in the process of reforming, the other nations that are considered questionable, but obviously they don't want to point out outright in case they get accused of being, for example, anti-Islam, have not, because they still live in the Dark Age, even though they have a new crown prince that is quite liberal, but not so liberal that he's managed to yet push through certain bills, certain laws that would enable certain levels of equality to be introduced to his country. But activists said the US move could hurt efforts to monitor and address human rights abuses around the world. I'd like to think there's a certain air of no about this. Another way of being able to do this is by simply going to that country or arranging a sit-down with them to discuss what you know and what they do, and negotiate some kind of change. Which is why I am somewhat hopeful that the sit-down between Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump bears some fruits with regards to human rights in North Korea. Announcing the decision to quit the council, Ms. Haley described the council as a hypocritical and self-serving organisation that displayed unending hostility towards Israel. This remark is in relation to the fact that the UN has condemned Israel about 18 times for breaking 18 international laws. I just thought I'd put that out there. I'm not going to offer any opinion on it because I couldn't be bothered to go through 18 different instances and laws that were broken and then make a judgment based on that. But I will point out that there are a number of articles out there that have said that Nikki Haley is wrong and that the UN is not being hostile to Israel because Israel broke international law or contravened international law 18 times. Anyway, she was speaking alongside US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who denounced the Council as a protector of human rights abusers. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres responded to the US decision to quit the Council by saying he would have much preferred the US to remain a member. The UN's Human Rights Chief, Farhan Hussein, called the US withdrawal disappointing, if not really surprising news. Israel, meanwhile, praised the decision. I kind of understand why. The US is becoming more and more, well, certainly with policy, trying to become more nationalist, so not getting involved in international politics, certainly when there is so much contradiction and hypocrisy there, it's understandable you not wanting to get involved in it. There are only so many times someone can be told you must be the bigger man and simply ignore it, or condemn it privately or openly, before you suddenly say, you know what, I'm done with this. And for someone like Trump to see this, I'm sure he's thinking this is nothing more than pandering, especially when Saudi Arabia is the chair. I can draw many comparisons and create a number of metaphors if people want me to, but quite frankly, I don't think I need to. The very idea a country with one of the worst human rights records currently being in charge of it, the Human Rights Council, is astonishing. Now this has, among allies, caused some tension and dismay. So, this is an analysis by Farhan from BBC News in New York. This is just the latest rejection of multilateralism by the Trump administration and will likely unsettle those who look to the United States to protect and promote human rights around the world. They don't need to be part of a corrupt body to do that. The United States has always been a conflicting relationship with the UN Human Rights Council. The Bush administration decided to boycott the council when it was created in 2006 for many of the same reasons cited by the Trump administration. The then UN ambassador was John Bolton, who is currently President Trump's national security advisor and a strong critic of the UN. It wasn't until years later in 2009 that the United States rejoined under the Obama administration. Imagine my shock. Many allies have tried to convince the United States to remain in the Council. Even many who agree with Washington's long-standing criticisms of the body believe the United States should actively work to reform it from within rather than disengaging. That language sounds very familiar, very Brexity. And I would argue that if you're a part of something that you can't really control, something you can't really affect enough change on, you have three options. Stay, suffer, which is one. You could start an illegal war or commit illegal airstrike action in another country and blame it on Russia, which is what we did with Syria when we didn't get our own way in the UN. Or you can leave, because that is a logical option. Now you don't have to do that, but it is ultimately up to the government to decide what they decide to be a member of. And regardless of how you perceive it, America must look out for its own interests, and not wanting to be seen on something so corrupt would surely be good optics, while others will go out of their way to paint it as bad optics because they have supposedly set a high standard for America, is a waste of time. A little further down the article, it has a section called Why Has the US Decided to Quit? The decision to leave the body follows years of US criticism. The country initially refused to join in 2006, arguing that, like the old Commission, the UN HRC has admitted nations with questionable human rights records, proven to be true. Entirely. It only joined in 2009 under Obama and won re-election to the Council in 2012. But human rights groups voiced fresh complaints about the body in 2013 after China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Algeria and Vietnam were elected members. All of those which scream human rights. Am I right? This followed Israel's unprecedented boycott of one of the Council's reviews, alleging unfair criticism from the body. Last year, Nikki Haley told the Council it was hard to accept that resolutions had been passed against Israel, yet none had been considered for Venezuela, where dozens of protesters had been killed during political turmoil. And as we all know, Venezuela is also one of those fantastic countries for human rights. If my sarcasm isn't obvious enough, hopefully me saying it is obvious sarcasm helps. Check the tags for the video. I think you'll notice me writing, Venezuela has no human rights. It's obvious sarcasm. As a tag, Israel is the only country that is subject to a permanent standing agenda item, meaning its treatment of the Palestinians is regularly scrutinized. On Tuesday, despite her harsh words for the UN HRC, Ms. Haley said she wanted to make it crystal clear that this step is not a retreat from our human rights commitments. And that, to be honest, is understandable. As I've stated, you don't have to be a member of a council to be officially in favour of human rights. In fact, government policy doesn't have to be UN policy at all. They can work side by side, of course, and of course if you want to be a part of some globalist thing, then yeah, sure. But this current government isn't globalist, really, is it? so I don't think that'll work.
Oh, goddowns.
Imagine my shock